Do you want to know the #1 way you can help set your child up for success later on in life? This is it. The #1 way you can set your child up for success is to teach them words. The words that they are exposed to every day funnel down into the vocabulary that they can pull from when they're speaking or writing. Here's how it works. As humans, we have 4 vocabularies. We have our auditory vocabulary, visual vocabulary, verbal vocabulary, and written vocabulary. In general, your verbal and written vocabulary are pretty similar, so for the sake of this video, I've put them into one category. Think of these raindrops as all the words that your child is exposed to throughout the day. Of these words, they funnel some of them into their auditory vocabulary, where they can understand these words if they hear them and in context. Maybe not that word on its own when someone says it, but if they say it in context, they understand it. Then, from there, only some of the words that they understand when they hear them, only some of those words are funneled down into the reading vocabulary, the visual vocabulary. They only understand a fraction of those words when they read them, which makes sense why your child gets vocabulary questions wrong on a reading test at school when you know they understand that word. If your child is going to write something correctly, they absolutely must understand it auditorily as well as visually. For example, think of a 3-year-old. 3-year-olds often mix up pronouns, being she, him, it, and they mix them up because they're not quite sure, they haven't quite figured those words out yet. So they hear you say those words and they understand exactly what you mean. If I were to say to my 3-year-old niece, she is playing on the slide, my niece would know exactly what I was talking about. She would know I was talking about a girl playing on the slide. But if my 3-year-old niece were to say it back to me, she obviously doesn't have this reading portion here that develops in kindergarten and then grows throughout your life. But from hearing to speaking would be appropriate for preschoolers. If she were to then speak to me and tell me that the girl is on the slide, she might say, him is on the slide, or it is on the slide. Then I understand that she knows what she's trying to say and I know what she's trying to say, but it is incorrect because it isn't down here in her speaking vocabulary yet. And that's where I would start correcting her. Another example would be myself. I heard my professors speak at a collegiate level. I read my college level textbooks, but do I use all of that vocabulary in my speaking and writing? Definitely not. The speaking vocabulary is often so small that we're exposed to the same exact words all day long, which is why it's so important to read, because the people around me don't usually say words that I don't know yet. I don't hear a lot of words that I haven't learned yet because I'm an adult. Kids, on the other hand, obviously hear tons of words they don't understand. So that moves on to reading. As your child's vocabulary grows, this reading vocabulary becomes even more important. It's important because children around 3rd grade go through a phase where they transition from learning to read to reading to learn. And as adults, we're not learning to read anymore. Most of us can read fine. We read so that we can learn things. So as your child grows up, this reading vocabulary is so important that it's there. If your child, before they make that switch from learning to read to reading to learn, if your child hasn't learned to read yet, or if they haven't really developed this funnel system right here from what they hear to what they read, if they haven't figured that out yet, this reading funnel isn't going to grow as fast as it needs to for them to keep up with the reading as they get older. So how can I combat this as a parent? Read to your children, have them read to you. Read everything. Read street signs, newspapers, magazines. If your child has already learned to read, maybe 2nd or 3rd grade, have them read instruction manuals to you while you do something. Then to solidify that reading foundation, have them write about it. Highlight a couple words that your child has been exposed to that day and have them write those words in a sentence. Have them write them in a paragraph. Have them write them so that it solidifies it into their brains. And just as with anything else, practice makes perfection. So let them feel safe and secure enough to learn new words and experiment with new words. Then you can encourage it in their writing as well. Let me know in the comments if there's anything that you think I'm missing or if there's anything that I didn't explain very well. Thanks again for visiting, from my bookshelf to yours.